Hello and welcome to the latest episode of How Could We, a podcast by EIT Climate-KIC hosted by me and Sophie Garrigou. In this season, we are focused on the new European Bauhaus, a key initiative of the European Union which aims to inspire people to imagine and build together a sustainable and inclusive future. We're talking to people from 3 projects who are involving local communities in the design of sustainable public spaces, and we'll be asking them what would a just, beautiful and climate-resilient future look like to you.
To me, a beautiful, resilient future is one where everyone feels like they're cared for and they can participate in society as much as any other one.
To me, a beautiful, resilient future is the one that includes all of the groups living in the city and leaves nobody behind.
This is Blanca Calvo and Raquel Colacios, 2 architects from Barcelona working on ASD Publics, a project that aims to reimagine and transform playgrounds in cities. Their goal was to provide design guidelines to policymakers to improve the inclusivity of public spaces for autistic children and their families. These guidelines have now been finalized and can be used in other cities or countries in Spain, in Europe, or even beyond. Hi Raquel, hi Blanca. Thank you very much for joining me today. Could I start by asking you to introduce yourself, both of you, and tell our listeners about what your job is?
Hi, my name is Blanca. I'm a researcher at the Urban Transformation and Global Change Lab at the Open University of Catalonia. And together with Raquel, we've been coordinating the project we'll present today. Basically, I'm an architect and urban planner. And I'm doing a lot of research on different fields, but the common ground is that it is about socioeconomic research and how to integrate vulnerable collectives.
Hello, I'm Raquel Colacios. Also, I'm an architect and I work at the Urban Transformation and Global Change Lab of the Open University of Barcelona. I'm the co-coordinator together with Blanca of the ASD Publics research project. And my whole line of research is about the social and environmental justice in public space.
So you already started to introduce the ASD Publics research project. The aim of the project was to better adapt playgrounds in cities for autistic children. And the project's very first step was to talk to families to understand how current playgrounds were not best suited for neurodiverse children. So before we get into the detail, could you let us know what you mean by neurodiversity and how the specific needs of autistic children differ from those of neurotypical children?
Yes, first of all, I would like to highlight that we are both architects. We are not experts in autism, but of course, we are very sensitive to the challenges and difficulties that autistic children and their families have in their daily life, specifically in public playgrounds. So throughout the project, we learned some of the specific needs that autistic children have. Also, I would like to start by defining what autism spectrum disorder is. It's a condition of the neurodevelopment that it's caused by differences in the brain. So people with ASD often have problems with social communication and interaction, and they have restricted or repetitive behaviors and interests. The main challenges that we took into consideration, because it can influence the way that we design parks and playgrounds, are challenges with social interactions. Children with autism can have problems interacting with others and following social norms, difficulty with new experiences. Also, autistic children may avoid change or experiencing new things in favor of those that are familiar for them. Also, they have sensory processing differences. It means that they perceive sensory stimuli differently as the information that it's interpreted differently by the brain. So they can either feel overwhelmed by sensory stimuli like noise, light, or colors, or the other way around. They may not easily react to these sensory stimuli. Also, escaping behaviors. About half of the children with autism, they present escape behaviors, so they just run away. So when designing a park, this is something you have to take into consideration. And finally, weak gross motor skills. Another common challenge, and this usually includes challenges with balance and coordination, but also functions that have to do with playing outdoors.
Does that mean that the parks have to be radically different, or is it that you're making some modifications?
I wouldn't say radically different. I mean, there's some aspects that are like very general and that impacts the park itself as an entire space, but actually small tweakings would really change things. And it's not that we're imagining something radically different to what parks are today. It's like small tweaks in the design and things that affect the broader area, but doesn't change radically what we know a park today.
And I think that's reassuring for policymakers, right? Who knows that it's basically awareness. If they knew that with these little tweaks, they could improve the experience of children with autism and their families, then it would be much, much more pleasant for everyone. And it seems like just adding a barrier to the playground, that's a good thing for every families, I guess.
I mean, that was one of the things that actually policymakers were the least happy with.
Do you know why?
Yeah, maybe parents would be happy. The ones that we spoke to here in Barcelona, it's easier to have a fence around the park so they can be more chilled and don't have to watch out all the time. But in Barcelona, the idea is to move towards allowing for children to test their autonomy. So if you put a barrier, they cannot test it. So, I mean, it depends. The playgrounds that are for very young children, and those ones always have a fence around them. But for the other ones, you would get in conflict with all aspects that are also important for the children.
Wow, that's really interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more now about the project and its objectives? So maybe we start by talking about the partners involved.
Sure. So let me introduce the partner. Raquel and myself, we already said we work at the Open University of Catalonia and we're a multidisciplinary research team. We both are architects, but we work with people from many more disciplines. And then we worked with an institute that's called IGAIN, Global Institute of Neurodevelopmental Integrated Care. And they have a lot of specialists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and occupational therapists, people in logopedia who work with children and adults in it. They have different conditions. Then the third partner was Lemur. That's an association, also mostly architects, but they have people from different disciplines and they work in projects about co-creation and participation, and they focus quite a bit on children. So they had developed this method called body-driven design, which is about engaging children in co-creation processes without using words. So the conversation was entirely removed and was much more observing them about how they move and their body postures, etc. And lastly, the fourth member was the local government, but this has to be split because there were different institutions there. So there was the ecology department, which is the urbanism department in Barcelona. And then there was the Municipal Institute for People with Disabilities, which they work particularly with people with disabilities and they have more social programs. They don't do urban design at all. And the Youth and Childhood Institute. Cross departmental, actually they do research and they touch different issues, but they're very active in this new plan that Barcelona is developing. They call it Plan for Play, which is about bringing play across the city, not just playgrounds, everywhere.
So it would be really helpful if you could explain what were the steps of the project. You started with observation, then you produced the guidelines. Can you talk about the process?
Yeah, sure. It's a 6 months project, so it was quite intense to do all the work in 6 months. But also we divided into phases and also trying to include the stakeholders in each of the phases. So first we did the diagnosis through a literature review and a shadowing process to 6 children that came through IGAIN. That was to understand their needs and challenges. Then we did the co-creation process. It was 4 workshops that we did with children and their families together with our partners, and where we got to observe and map their preferences, movements. We mapped what senses were stimulated and also their interaction. So for that also we had support of the professional therapists and their families in order to interpret their reactions. And then finally we had some sessions with experts, families, public administration, like to involve all the stakeholders to discuss the results that we got from the workshops and also the interviews, because we sent interviews to families of autistic children. So we had these sessions to discuss and validate the results. And so with all of that, we came up with the 2 guidelines that we have published, one for the design of public space and for the methodology, the co-creation methodology.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much. So you just mentioned the observation sessions that you had. Can you maybe say a few words about one observation that really surprised you? Something that you did not expect?
Something that was very, very shocking for me was to realize that some stuff that we take for granted and we think are obvious, they're not. For example, a slide. or a swing. Okay, I can't remember when I was 2-3 years old what it was for me, but I would imagine that anyone sees a child like playing on the slide or the swing and they know how to do it. And this, as Raquel said, they struggle like with learning the social rules, etc. So some stuff is not that obvious. So unless the swing looks exactly like the swing they know, but some of them will not realize that they have to play that way with it. So then it becomes a problem. They can of course choose not to play with it, but you don't know if they don't like it or it's because they don't know how to play with it and how to have fun. And for me, that was the most shocking out of everything we came across.
Oh, thanks for sharing. Raquel, do you have one?
Yeah, I have. I went to do the shadowing process with two girls. They were twins and they were both autistic. And so for me, it was to acknowledge how wide the autistic spectrum is, because one of them could stay in the park and play, although she was not communicating with the other children around. But the other one, she was not even looking to us or neither speaking. And she was all the time running away from the park. And she wanted to go to a commercial center that was nearby, because it had these escalators and she wanted just to go up and down of the escalators. So their father was running after the one that was escaping all the time, and the mom was staying with the other one. So they both had to stop working and they just dedicate themselves to their two children. So it was quite like impressive also to see the wide spectrum and also the dedication that you need to have.
The impact it has on the family and the parents and everyone.
Yes.
And what I wanted to add to what Raquel said, and it's super important, we imagine that a cognition has like characteristics and then you fix these things and everything is sorted. And it's so diverse with autism. Every child is different to the other one. I mean, there's some common characteristics, but that's why this work is so difficult. But you cannot say like you do 1, 2, 3 and the problem is solved. It will be solved for one child, but not for the other one. And they still have the same condition.
Yeah, it's not because they're on the same like spectrum that there's a huge diversity in this. Thank you. One of the main aspects of the project was to include the families that we just mentioned in the design of this playgrounds. Can you talk to us about the co-creation methods that you used or how this looked like?
This is interesting because it's actually changed a lot from the moment we drafted the proposal until what it became later. So one of the key objectives was to design with and for. And I want to highlight this with children with autism. And we really envisioned them having a much more active role in the co-creation. And as we did the process, we realized first that it was very, very difficult. And they participated, but didn't have such an active role. But the other thing was that the families have a lot to say. And this came through the associations a lot. They really insisted that we cannot leave the families outside. And actually we learned a lot, like these visits to the park that Raquel was saying. Some of the things that are in the design guidelines, they come directly from those families. And yeah, they have a lot to say. And the issue, I think, is also like they need to be heard. Nobody asks them. So they only are in conversations with people with their own problem, like whatever, this 1% of society, people have autism. So at the end of the day, they feel like policymakers, architects, whoever, the rest, we never talk to them. And it was very important to make them feel like they were included into this, a part that they helped us a lot.
Thank you. And I think it's interesting how, yes, projects like this, they have to adapt yourself. You have to adapt. You may have planned for something at the beginning, which was integrating the children, but then in the end, it just happened a bit differently. Raquel, did you have something to add?
Yeah, well, I wanted to add that I think the integration of children for us has been like a differential aspect of the project, no? Because also, yes, we need to include families because they need to be heard, but also many of the studies that have been done before come specifically from asking families, but not from looking to the children, no? So in this project, what we did was specifically working with children. Also, I agree that we need other ways to engage families, but I think having children and looking at them and being them first person that we had in the workshop, it was great. Also the first-hand information that we got.
One of the goals of the project was to come up with those guidelines that could be used first by the city of Barcelona, where you're based, where you conducted those observations, to make sure that those playgrounds are better adapted for all. Can you give us a few examples of the suggestions that you came up with?
the design guidelines, we divided those in 4 sections. So first section, it means that the characteristics that the space should have, like the reduction of external stimuli, escapism mitigation, or that it's a space easy to navigate, etc. Then the second was the characteristics of the play elements in itself, like include increasing sensory play or to adapt for motor stimulation. Also to include calm spaces, so when they feel overwhelmed, they can go and stay relaxed. Also to include elements that help waiting times, helps them with this type of social norms.
What does it look like, element of waiting times?
We just suggest a guideline, and we have some examples, like maybe including a big sun clock, so you can turn the sun clock so the person that is on the swing know that you're waiting, and you know that when the sun is out, you can sit on the swing, this type of things. Or pictograms. I think there can be thousands of solutions for each specific guideline. We also leave space for designers to be creative in that sense. Also, we thought about management of the space, that it's not something that has to do with the space in itself, but the way we interact with the space. So these families, they face many social issues when they are in the park. So we understood that including, for instance, a public program of mediators, we understand it would be a person that would help families with children with ASD to avoid conflicts with other children, or to raise awareness of these, the type of needs or challenges that they have. And also then we had the last section that it's like other issues, because we didn't know what title to give. But that has to do with raising awareness. We thought about creating an awareness campaign and also creating an app. And this is a solution that many families came up with. Like, it would be great to have an app that we can check to which park we can go, that you have real pictures of the park, so you can anticipate the children, we are going here. You can have instructions of play elements, and you can even interact with other families. So it would be also a way to give voice to the families.
I love that. Branka, did you have something else?
Elias said that some of these recommendations come straight from the families. I want to highlight one that I really, really like. And this was at the start of the project. There was this mother that told us that her child struggles with the swings, etc. And they use this swing that you can make with a blanket, parachuting blanket, we call it here. And she told us if there was like a hook, something I can put my swing on, that would sort it out. Because many of the recommendations that were coming from the psychologists, etc., were about like stuff that you cannot really have in a public space because it gets vandalized or because of maintenance. And they lack sensory stuff, like sensory blankets, etc. And we were like, oh my God, you cannot put this in a public space, going to get burnt out or whatever, vandalized. And that woman, I found it brilliant. She was not an architect, anything like this, and she gave us a solution. And this is one of the recommendations, that you set up the permanent structure in a way that families can come and they can put something there. So then in the section of managing the space, we gave recommendations on how to do this. So the easy way is that families bring their own stuff from home, but if the local government can be more involved, you could have a space with this guy that takes care of the mediator. So the mediator could be involved in managing this material and making sure that everything was on a proper standard and well maintained. And this was something that the family suggested to us.
I think that's fantastic. And this is really what we wanted to talk about in this series, is like the idea of inclusivity, right? Like not just doing recommendation or not doing plans without including the people who are actually concerned, because most of the time, as you just showed Blanca, the family, they know what their children need. And it's just about listening to them, taking the time and adapting what exists today. So I think that's super, super interesting. And the mediator is also incredible, because as we know, it's also a lot about raising awareness to others' families, because one of the things that can happen in playgrounds is also the violence, basically, of other families who are not aware of the specific needs of autistic children. And that, I think, I love the idea of the mediator. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, honestly speaking, this is something, again, that didn't come from us, that came from the local government in Barcelona. They already have a program for mediators. They call it like support to play. We had the percentage, but it was over 90% of the people that requires this program. It's not because of physical disabilities, but of neurodiversity. So they have this program, and they have this person that goes with one family to the park. And we said, instead of being like per family, why doesn't this person stay at the park? So all these other families families know about that the park has this person that manages the issue. So it was also like something we got from them. And the social issue that we're talking about is something that when we started drafting the proposal again, we didn't really anticipate, and the families really brought up, and we eventually realized we had to take this into consideration. Okay, we're architects and urban planners, and we usually think of how to design things like very physical material responses, but this was one of the things that really came from a request from families.
I want to talk about the very concrete aspects of the project now. So can you tell us how the city is already using the guidelines? If you already heard about interest from other cities in Spain or in other countries?
So unfortunately, the project was very short and we had a lot of work to get done. So we kind of pushed this thing further on. And right now we're developing like a checklist of all these initiatives we learned from government and all these conflicts sometimes with other regulations, etc. So guideline by guideline, there's this table of where it could fit in and where there is a problem. But we have to share this, I'm hoping, by the end of this month. We have just been too busy. This would be with the city of Barcelona, and hopefully, I don't know, maybe through the metropolitan area of Barcelona, this would be a mechanism to extend it.
Raquel?
So I would like to add that as it was a very short project, we really feel we are like at the beginning of the research. So we are now looking for more funding opportunities to continue with the research. And so maybe also it's the way to involve other public administrations, etc.
If you had only one advice that you would give to enable cities across the world to ensure inclusive play, what would it be after those 6 months of research?
I would say, I mean, it's quite a basic one, but work with the families. That would be my key one.
I totally agree. That's what I was going to say. Listen to families.
Thank you so much, Raquel and Blanca. I'm so happy that we had this conversation. It's such an interesting topic. I really wish you the best for the future. I hope you're going to find a lot more funding to continue and that this project is going to travel outside of Barcelona, outside of Spain, even outside of Europe. Thank you so, so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Anne-Sophie. We hope many people listen to this and they enjoy it too.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you everyone for listening. This was the second episode from a series of 3 focused on the New European Bauhaus initiative. Please follow us on Spotify, share the episodes, do all the things that you know can help us. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook and Instagram if you look for Climate-KIC. Get in touch with us at media@climate-kic.org to find out more about what we do at EIT Climate-KIC or to find out more on what we're doing on the New European Bauhaus. This episode was produced by Barbara Mendes-George. Join us next time for the final episode on this series on the EIT New European Bauhaus initiative.